Welcome guys, and today, as you can see, I'm not in my room. I'm at my gym here because I decided to do it here in the gym. It's way more fresher, and also I kind of like the light, and I'm actually recording with my phone, which has a better quality overall than my computer camera. Besides that, today is again a video lecture. I'm very excited about the topic that I'm going to talking about because it is a topic that I'm also talk about in my book. So for that matter, let's just start. So today's lecture is going to be about depression, major depression mainly. So we have to distinguish between major depression and bipolar depression. Bipolar depression is a kind of depression where you have manic highs. Manic highs means you cannot control yourself in your own actions, the things that you are doing. For example, you are speaking too fast without even noticing, or you are, for example, not sleeping enough. Sleep deprivation is also one symptom of it. But also buying, for example, things constantly that you cannot afford, or being in toxic relationships and you are seeking all the time for this trouble. So this is bipolar depression, where you have these many habits, which is also followed after by periods of crashes. So you have these highs, very highs, where you are seeking all the time for something and you're speaking fast, so you're very high, in a very high mood, let's say, and then you crash immediately after. So this is bipolar depression, and followed by bipolar depression we have also major depression, which is also called unipolar depression. And this is like the depression where you are in a more lower state of your mood all the time, so you are experiencing more sadness. And believe it or not, but at least 5% of the population are major depressed. So that means, take for example 100 people, at least 5 of them are going to be major depressed or at least diagnosed of major depression. It's quite a significant number, and it's shocking also how many people are depressed, have major or experience major depression right now. So speaking about major depression, because this is what we are going to mainly focus on, bipolar depression is something that we can discuss in another video, but major depression is like what most of the people are experiencing or are diagnosed with. And how can you know if someone is major depressed or clinical depressed, let's say? So the critiques are very simple. Before I begin to talk about critiques, or how can you find out that this individual is depressed, major depressed or clinical depressed, I like to notify that it is not because you are not sleeping enough for a few days, or you've been fired out of your job and you feel depressed, or you in some way you are not in the mood, you feel kind of sad. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are clinically depressed or major depressed. That doesn't mean that specifically. It is not, you have some correlation, you have those symptoms sometimes, but it doesn't mean directly you have this, because those are states of moods that can happen to everyone, and it's there at a short period of time. For example, when you're experiencing a breakup or something like this, it can happen that at some point you feel sad, you don't have the energy, and so on and so forth. But this is quite normal and doesn't really mean that you are clinical or major depressed. Not at all. Major depression has a more significant meaning, and psychologists have been studying it for years and are confronted with the human brain for many years. And it's a very, very important topic for everything, And what we know from psychological literature is that you can notify, that you can know when someone is depressed by the way of how he or she is speaking to you. So by speaking in a way that there's something off, you can clearly see it. So language is the one who clarifies you that individual might be depressed. And the criteria for major depression can be in two forms. Can be in the present form or in the absence form. So the present form, we are talking here about people who feel sad all the time, or grief, or have the tendency to cry very easily. That doesn't necessarily mean if you're crying very easily that you're majorly depressed. No, some people have the ability to cry more easier, some not. But if you have this feeling that normally you are not someone who cries very easily, but now you do, then there's might be an issue or a causality that could lead to major depression, and you should consider to consult a psychiatrist. But there's also the lack of ability to enjoy things. So you haven't, let's say, the tendency to enjoy things like, for example, food, sex, or sport, whatever, or things that you used to enjoy, you don't enjoy it anymore. This is also a very common symptom of major depression, and this is called, hopefully I can spell it correctly, anhedonia. Anhedonia. So this is the major symptom for major depression. But there's also this feeling of guilt and self-harm. So if you are constantly thinking about the past, what you have done, and you cannot escape from it internally, and you are always make yourself believe that it is your fault, and that can lead to self-harm. So it means that you physically hurt yourself, or even that could lead also to suicide. So this is very, very dangerous. So guilt is also one of the presence symptoms that occur when you have major depression. And then there are a bunch of others symptoms like delusional thinking, where you're just constantly lying to yourself, or you don't even notice that you're lying you're just throwing words, and you don't even know that that you are making things up in sort of ways. So anti-self confabulation is it called, if we want to use specific terms. So let's talk about what happens in the brain when you have major depression. What kind of hormones are responsible for it? There's one hormone which is called the stress hormone, which is basically cortisol. So having high cortisol all the time is a major symptom of having depression. And what we know from cortisol is that cortisol is very high, should be very high in the morning and in the early afternoon, but it lowers later in the day, so in the evening, for example. But having this very high even in the evening means that you could be major depressed, because it's a stress hormone and it makes you in a way feel very awake or very stressed. And what is also a very common hormone that could lead to depression is the thyroid hormone. So at least 20% of the people with major depression are hopefully I can spell that correctly too, are hypothyroidal. So it means they don't produce enough thyroid hormones, because thyroid is there for stabilize your metabolism. Either you have a slow or fast one, but it stabilizes it. And it's also there to make photosynthesis, so protein synthesis. But if that hormone is not present enough, so if your body doesn't produce much thyroid hormones, it could lead to low energy levels, and also low metabolism. So low energy, low metabolism, meaning also low motivation, low thriveness, and so on and so forth, and you get depressed. Speaking of the hormones itself that could lead to major depression, we can also speak about the hormones that could actually reduce major depression. And these are, for example, serotonin or epinephrine or norepinephrine, which are basically hormones that are responsible for a better mood of being. So serotonin, for example, is the mood of happiness. So we feel better if serotonin is high. Or epinephrine or norepinephrine are the so-called adrenaline hormones. So it means that we have more adrenaline in our body, and we feel more powerful. We feel more energized with those hormones. And speaking of that, how can we increase those hormones? So how can we treat major depression in general? So major depression can be treated with cold bath or cold showers, for example. It might not work for everybody, but it might have some potential significant benefits to it, which what it does is actually it releases norepinephrine and epinephrine into your brain. So it means whenever you are taking a cold bath, you are going to release those hormones, and it can actually decrease your depression, your major depression. And then you have exercising in general, cardio, because after a good exercise session or during exercises, more frequent, can actually elevate your serotonin levels. Serotonin, we know, it's this happiness hormone. And in general, exercise and doing sport, you know, cardio, whatever, is the number one method, let's say, against depression overall. It's, for me, so it's my personal take on it. It's probably not the number one for everybody, but it could be the number one for a lot of people who are major depressed. So these are some methods to heal, so to fight against major depression. But having major depression doesn't mean you have strong major depression. Doesn't mean you have this very significant clinical depression where it's really concerned, because when you have really strong major depression means that you normally, so people who have this normally don't have even the energy or the motivation to do those things, to go and exercise, to go and do something about it, to do a cold bath, you know. And that's because for them it's usually better to take antidepressants. And for long term, it's of course not a good thing to do when you take antidepressants all the time, because your body just used to it. And it's hard to get rid of it. So this was about depression, major depression mainly. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you also enjoyed this new environment of mine. Stay tuned, guys, for more, and may the fire be with you. Have a wonderful night.